In the wake of Cyclone Idai, international aid agencies scramble to avert a growing humanitarian crisis in southern Africa. The secret history of one of the continent's most powerful Islamic militant groups. And a farm initiative creates jobs for Cameroon's youth. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. The death toll from Cyclone Idai has climbed to over 750 in the three southern African countries slammed by the powerful storm. International aid agencies continue to scramble to reach survivors with needed relief and to stop a growing humanitarian crisis. Africa 54's Paul Dio has more.
The United Nations and international aid agencies are rushing food, medicine and other emergency relief supplies to survivors of tropical cyclone Idai that ripped through southern Africa, killing hundreds while destroying buildings and farmland across Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi. In Mozambique, the death toll from Cyclone Idai that slammed the port city of Beira and the surrounding areas has reached nearly 450 and is still climbing. The number of people in makeshift camps has also risen from 18,000 to 128,000, according to the nation's Land and Environment Minister.
It has increased from 417 to 446 lives. We also have a number of people that were affected, which is 531,000. Obviously, these are preliminary numbers. As soon as we do our survey of the ground, we'll be able to give you updates on this.
The tropical storm made landfall in Beira on March 15th with high winds and lashing rain that lasted for more than 9 hours, leaving the low-lying city of 600,000 isolated. International aid organizations have stepped up their daily deliveries of aid on cargo planes from around the world. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says they are preparing to deploy 3 large field hospitals as early as next week. The United Nations Food Program is ramping up its airdrops to isolated pockets of people stranded by the flood waters and delivered food parcels to displaced families sheltering in schools and other public buildings northwest of Beira. Cyclone Idai also lashed eastern Zimbabwe, killing more than 250 people, a toll that actually could be as much higher. Worst hit was Chimanimani in Manicaland, an eastern province which borders Mozambique. UN agencies and the Red Cross have rushed emergency food and medicine by helicopter to the stricken countries. Some families are burying their dead in damp graves as injured survivors filled up the hospitals. One resident told VOA 26 people from the area had already been buried. Nisha Sitole says he walked a long distance after his village had been cut off by rushing flood waters.
There is no bridge. All bridges were swept away. Even the biggest bridge at Chata, that is Nyahode Bridge, was swept away again.
Meanwhile, in Malawi, 56 people have died and a large number of schools in the flooded affected areas of southern Malawi have been closed. Some are being used as evacuation centers. Children are studying outside under trees after the floods destroyed their classrooms.
Most of the learners, they are not coming to school because the rivers are flooded and they are unable to cross those rivers to come to school. The
extent of the current flooding in southern Malawi is overwhelming relief organizations, leaving many struggling to respond in hard-to-reach areas. Malawi officials said the situation is becoming unbearable given the unprecedented levels of destruction.
We need a lot of food. We don't know. Perhaps the lorries we see here, they are to be distributed to us. We don't know, because up now we haven't received any food at all.
Weather forecasters are expecting more rain to fall in the region, and cyclone-affected families can only hope for quicker intervention from the international aid community. Paul Diho, VOA News.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling on the international community to move quickly in providing financial assistance to 3 Southern African nations devastated by Cyclone Idai. The UN has appealed for nearly $282 million to cover immediate needs for the next 3 months in Mozambique, which was hardest hit. Appeals for Malawi and Zimbabwe are expected to be made in the coming days. The powerful cyclone, strong winds and heavy rains have made hundreds of thousands of people homeless. The Chinese team is among the humanitarians working to prevent the spread of potentially deadly diseases such as cholera and malaria, especially in the Mozambique city of Beira, where restoration works is in full swing.
We want to kill pathogens and prevent transmission through disinfection. We also want to let local people know how to avoid infection from pathogens and how to avoid infecting family and friends after getting infected.
Well, the UN and its partner agencies are assisting affected communities in the region. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies are appealing for $30.5 million to provide life-saving aid for 200,000 of the most vulnerable survivors in Mozambique. And the U.S. Department of Defense says it will provide $6.5 million in immediate humanitarian assistance to Mozambique. Now, for more on the challenges faced by aid agencies in the cyclone-ravaged regions, James Elder, UNICEF Regional Chief of Communications in Eastern and Southern Africa, joins me live now from Beira. Good evening, Mr. Elder.
Hi there, good evening.
Yes. Now, we know that a great number of those that have been affected by this cyclone are children. Tell us, up to this point, what are some of the challenges you're facing in trying to help them?
They're almost innumerable. Look, the main one is, of course, clean water. This was a crisis that, ironically, was all about water. It was a real double blow, this deathly wall of wind that came through, as your correspondent said 12 days ago, then followed by incredible flooding. So kids who are always the most vulnerable, just simply because of their age and their health, were hit the hardest. They saw their homes disappear, they saw their schools washed away, they saw sometimes family members washed away, mums, dads, brothers, and then they're surrounded by dirty water. They have no access to that most essential source, which is clean water. Yeah. Now we know cholera is there. Cholera is that one thing that can turn a crisis into a catastrophe. So there are many aspects that we need to protect as UNICEF. Water's the first one. Getting kids back to their families and communities is an absolute second. Now, there has been an appeal from the United Nations Secretary General himself, Mr. Guterres, for more assistance. What is missing? What do you need? And when must it be done in order to save lives? Right now, we have everything we need. This is always about finances and money, because we know that this will require support for the next week, next 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But right now, today, we have cargo planes arriving, we have boats arriving, we've repaired the water system with the UK development arm, DFID, in Beira. We're setting up cholera treatment centres. So right now, we are doing what UNICEF does best in terms of responding to a major emergency. But this won't be over quickly. These are traumatised kids. These kids require homes to go back to, they require schools, they require nutrition. All these things require funds. So there's a real request for funds in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe and in Malawi to ensure that organisations like UNICEF can meet the kids' needs today, tomorrow, but also in 3 or 4 weeks' time. In terms of a cholera outbreak there, to what extent does it compound the problems, given that it spreads rather quickly in such a situation? Yeah, look, it's the worst case scenario in so many ways. It's not completely unexpected, of course. You're talking about families who had everything submerged and there were decomposing bodies, no access to clean water. So this is perfect breeding conditions for cholera, which is why we do have these treatment centres, why we will have a vaccine coming for 1 million people very soon. But it massively compounds the problem. It spreads very quickly. It kills very quickly. So our main game, of course, has been to save lives. Cholera takes lives. So this is right now the primary aim is to continue to keep it at bay, to limit this outbreak with all the other agencies who are working literally 18-hour days. But this is not easy and it requires everyone's support. Well, Ms. Elder, thank you very much.
James Elder there is the UNICEF Regional Chief of Communications in Eastern and Southern Africa. He joined me live via Skype from Beira in Mozambique. Now, Al-Shabaab, or the youth, is a Somalia-based Islamist insurgent group. The 1,000-strong insurgency remains the principal security challenge in the East African nation. Somalia has seen militant groups come and go during its decades of political upheaval. Al-Shabaab, which is trying to topple Somalia's Western-backed central government, was driven out of Mogadishu in 2011 and has since been forced from most of its other strongholds. However, it remains a threat, with its fighters frequently carrying out bombings in Somalia and in neighboring Kenya. Well, for more insight into the tactics and resilience of the terrorist group, I'm joined by Harun Maruf, VOA Somali editor and co-author of the book Inside Al-Shabaab, The Secret History of Al-Qaeda's Most Powerful Ally. Harun, a pleasure to have you back on Africa 54. Now, first, let's go to the beginnings. How was Al-Shabaab actually born?
Al-Shabaab are three groups. The group that were angry with the intervention of Ethiopian forces into Somalia in 2006 that toppled the Islamic courts. But before that, there was a hardcore leadership of Somali jihadists who were trained in Afghanistan, who had connection with Al-Qaeda. And this group are the group that came into Somalia, established, mentored, opened the training grounds, and set up the base for militancy in Somalia. Yeah. And on top of that, the largest group within Al-Shabaab are the group who were being recruited for the last 10 years by Al-Shabaab. These are the majority of the Al-Shabaab group now. These are the foot soldiers who are attacking Somali government forces, AMISOM forces. So these are the three groups within Al-Shabaab.
Now, some have drawn comparisons and contrasts, say, with groups like Boko Haram. How is it organized? Tell us a little bit about your research on how it's organized.
Al-Shabaab is a very structured, very well-run organization. When we're talking about the militancy organization, they're very bureaucratic. They're very much entrenched in society. They collect the taxes. They have leadership. They have organizational structure. They use community. They use clans. This is an organization that have transactional global agenda jihadist objectives. On one part of the day, you will see them attacking Kenya, saying it's in response to the decision made by President Trump. On the second half of the day, they are attacking forces in Somalia, claiming to be liberating foreign crusaders from Somalia. So they are very manipulative, and they play both ways.
Yeah, and I've seen that even when one of their leaders is killed or official, they actually announce it and announce a replacement, which is very, very astonishing. Now, what has made Al-Shabaab that resilient? Because we've seen, even at a time when they claim they've been kicked out of Mogadishu and other strongholds, they still manage to come back and strike.
Yeah, there are two ways to answer this question. One is the weakness of the Somali government and Somali authorities, which have been struggling to build a viable, strong Somali national security force to counter Al-Shabaab. You need intelligence, you need well-paid, well-trained, well-armed Somali forces. Somalia is under UN arms embargo. They cannot import all the weapons they need in order to fight against Al-Shabaab. The other side is that Al-Shabaab has time in the countryside and in other towns in Somalia. When they have time, that means they can plan attack, they can recruit, they can prepare for the next attack. Just tonight, we have seen another explosion in Mogadishu. There was another explosion yesterday. There was a major explosion and complex attack on Saturday in Mogadishu. So whenever Al-Shabaab has time, which is what they were given in Somalia by AMISOM and Somali government authorities, they prepare and they plan and they become more bold and stronger.
Very quickly, how do you see the future of Somalia and Al-Shabaab, that relationship?
Well, there's Al-Shabaab, there's the force that are fighting against Somali government and AMISOM force, but there's also Al-Shabaab, the ideology. There's Al-Shabaab, the business. Al-Shabaab is very much entrenched, as I said, in businesses, in ideologically, in schools, in universities, in society. So you need to have a way to deal with those core individuals who are determined to fight, ready to die. You need to address that issue through militarily. You need to address people who are with Al-Shabaab ideologically, through ideological approach, you need to engage the community and the scholars in order to address that. But you also need to address the economical aspect of Al-Shabaab, which is a lot of people are with Al-Shabaab in order to benefit. So you need to address that too.
Okay. Well, looks like we've run out of time for now, but really a good read. I think your book will help people to understand more about Al-Shabaab, Inside Al-Shabaab. That's a book co-authored by Harun Maruf, and you wrote it with Dan Joseph. Well, that's Harun Maruf, who is editor of VOA Somali and co-author of the book Inside Al-Shabaab, The Secret History of Al-Qaeda's Most Powerful Ally. Up north now, Khaled Abol Naga, the multi-award-winning Egyptian actor, filmmaker, and a UN Goodwill Ambassador, was one of the millions of Egyptians who took to the streets in January 2011 to call for regime change and an end to Hosni Mubarak's rule. Abul Naga has been a vocal critic of Egypt's iron-fisted military rule, and in 2014 was accused of treason by supporters of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who became president in June 2014. But he says, and I quote, brushing any voice against President al-Sisi's government as terrorists is an act of terror itself. Abul Naga participated in a U.S. congressional briefing to raise awareness about human rights violations and the newly introduced constitutional amendments that could derail a future transition to democracy in Egypt. Following his participation in that briefing, he was allegedly smeared by the Egyptian media, and the Egyptian Actors Union fired him. He spoke about the situation to VOA's Mohammed Al-Shinawi.
The state of freedom of expression in Egypt is dire. We all know. I don't think anybody is in denial anymore, even Egyptians in Egypt. We all know that the whole polarization strategy of President Sisi and his government to polarize Egyptians and basically tag anybody who has any opinion against the government and their policies be tagged as a Muslim Brotherhood or a traitor and so on. So it is an act of terror in its own, because what you do is you're basically terrorizing individuals and civil society from having an opinion, which is an integral part of any democracy. So.
Well, that was Khaled Abul Naga, an Egyptian actor, filmmaker, and a UN Goodwill Ambassador, speaking to VOA's Mohammed Al-Shinawi. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. And we're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out. Share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, Cameroon's innovative program to encourage young people to farm. But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern met Wednesday with Muslim community leaders in Dunedin, the town where the man lived who is accused of killing 50 people at two Christchurch mosques. Ardern says many Muslims remain concerned for their safety, even though the suspect is in custody.
There was a discussion over what would happen next, what we could do to make sure that the community continues to feel safe, particularly women who obviously wear their faith. And we talked a little bit about the ongoing police presence, and that will continue for the time being, but then beyond that. Our job is to make sure that the community and New Zealand as a whole knows that safety is our #1 priority, and to give that sense of security. equally, members of the community everywhere can give that sense of security as well.
Adin also visited an Islamic early learning center and read a book to the children. The 28-year-old Australian white supremacist charged with murder in the March 15 attacks is scheduled to return to court on Friday, April the 5th. More than a week has passed since a white supremacist gunned down 50 Muslims during a Friday prayers in Christchurch, New Zealand. Some 15,000 kilometers away, a recently formed group in New York, Muslim Community Patrol and Services, has found itself on the front lines as it counsels distraught neighbors. Soon its presence will be widely felt and seen throughout America's largest city. VOA's Ramon Taylor reports.
We'll keep our windows down, we'll observe everything, we'll listen for sounds.
Nazrul Islam is an imam and a Quranic school principal. Soon, he'll also be patrolling New York City streets, unarmed, in a Ford Taurus inscribed with the words, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you.
Say if someone an immigrant came to this country from, Arabic-speaking country and they might be in trouble or they need help and they say Assalamu alaikum. They probably don't know how to read English, but they see Assalamu alaikum in Arabic. They'll definitely know this is, there are Muslim people in that car. So they can come and they can, ask us if they need anything.
Last week's deadly attack in New Zealand is the latest in a wave of hate crimes against Muslims and migrants worldwide. The newly formed Muslim Community Patrol and Services, while intended to provide mentorship and local crime prevention, has also been a source of support for residents dealing with personal crises. More than 50 volunteers strong, they are equipped to bridge multiple language gaps. They are also trained in basic security, in CPR, and as chaplains and mental health counselors. The group is not unique. Brooklyn also has an Asian civilian patrol.
I always thought, why don't Muslims have that? Everyone should have this. This is amazing, right? It's a common ground between cultures.
Volunteers with the Brooklyn Asian Civilian Observation Patrol also ride in patrol vehicles resembling the police. The language barrier, along with a spike in crimes, led to the formation of the patrol.
Realistically, it's impossible to eliminate racism, so there has to be an organization speaking on our behalf.
Group founder Louis Liu immigrated from China in the 1990s.
Since we started our organization about 5 years ago, we've seen a lot of improvement between the police and the local community, particularly crime victims. We enable immigrants to express themselves without any fear or concern, and the law enforcement has confidence in the role that we're playing.
Mawish Fatma, who grew up in Brooklyn, hopes her community will view its volunteers as older brothers and sisters.
Every community really needs their own kind of community patrol.
The Muslim Community Patrol says it plans to expand operations to all of New York City. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
U.S. congressional Democrats are calling for the release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, saying the American public deserves to know the details of the investigation. They found no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 campaign. Full disclosure could help answer why Mueller could not rule out an obstruction of justice charge against President Donald Trump. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports from Capitol Hill.
The results of the Mueller report now known, but so far only in summary. Attorney General Barr has to act with caution before releasing it in full, Republicans said.
Throwing innocent people under the bus and throwing open classified records doesn't strike me as a good idea. And I trust him to begin to go through this.
But without the full report, Democrats said it is impossible to make an informed decision.
I don't need Attorney General Barr's interpretation of the report. I am for the report. And our main thrust on this issue is simply transparency. Release the report, then come to conclusions.
Heads of 6 Democratic-controlled House committees formally asked Barr to turn over the report by April 2nd. If he does not comply, a House Judiciary Democrat hinted at their next steps.
As a committee, we have a subpoena power, and frankly, I don't see anything in the special counsel's regulations that would prohibit Attorney General Barr from releasing it. We have a 420-0 vote in the House, the People's House, that indicates that it should be seen, and the percentage of the American people who argue for that point.
Mueller's report welcomed by President Trump, who said it ended some Democrats' discussion of impeachment.
I don't think they're talking about impeachment. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. Our country is in incredible shape. They and others created a fraud in our country with this ridiculous witch hunt, where it was proven very strongly, no collusion, no obstruction, no nothing.
Democrats say the full report could help resolve lingering questions about Mueller's decision not to fully exonerate Trump of obstruction of justice charges, even as they push for a renewed focus on policy.
House Democrats are focused on kitchen, table, pocketbook issues involving lower health care costs and increased pay for everyday Americans.
But they are also still forging ahead with their own investigations into other Trump activities, including his tax returns and foreign business dealings. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
Well, and here's what's trending. At 26, Gabrielle Eta can make as much as $800 a month. That's an impressive wage in rural Cameroon, where many live in poverty. Gabrielle is one of 2,000 young people who have benefited from a government program training young Cameroonians how to run successful agriculture businesses. He now employs 3 others. The government and International Fund for Agricultural Development plan is a way to combat rural poverty, which looks likely to get worse with climate change. The program hopes to train 25,000 young people and create 5,000 new businesses. Well, and finally, home design is going green, and not just in the garden. It's called the Evolving House. That's because it can change almost in an instant. At the Ideal Home Show at London's Kensington Olympia Exhibition Centre, the show home is an eco-friendly prefabricated modular building spanning just over 2,200 square feet and made from 22 modular units. Its steel frame system lets occupants adapt and change its configuration. The modular homes can range from $132,000 up to over $1.3 million. It's claimed to be more environmentally friendly in comparison to traditional bricks and mortar homes, causing less waste in construction and using more sustainable materials. And that's what's trending today. Now, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa, that's between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.